Hello, good evening. Thank you very much for coming. This is the last session of this symposium, and we had a great experience these last 2 days, and we really hope that you enjoy this event. The last event is related, of course, to languages, and the name of this talk is Opening the World's Door, One Language at a Time. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker, Chuck Smith. Chuck Smith is a language enthusiast fluent in multiple languages who has devoted his career to fostering linguistic diversity and enhancing cross-cultural dialogue. Early in his career, he founded the Esperanto version of Wikipedia, established the first job search site for Esperanto speakers, and was instrumental in incorporating Esperanto into Duolingo's curriculum. His contributions earned him the Esperantist of the Year, an accolade he won in 2015. From 2014 to 2016, he co-organized the Polyglot Gathering, the mecca of global language aficionados and language bloggers. Since then, Chuck has served as founder and CTO of Amikumu, an innovative social networking app designed to link language learners with nearby native speakers. Please welcome our speaker today.
Hello, I'm Chuck Smith, and I was born and raised in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and have been living the last 17 years in Germany. And when I was in college, I had a double major in computer science and math, with a minor in philosophy. So it doesn't really matter what your major is or what you're studying. You can also follow languages as a passion and incorporate them also into your career and life. So I think I see a few of you. It's the last session. You're nodding off a bit. So I'm going to get to the meat of the issue at first. So I want to help you find ways that you can seek foreign language opportunities, and then I'll go into how languages have given me opportunities. The one thing I would implore is to find local language events. So you can either search, say, on Facebook or meetup.com. Or even just type the name of the city and what language you're searching for, and often there's a group of people meeting locally who speak that language, whether they're natives or whether they're also learners like you. And they'll often welcome you with open arms, so you can practice your languages there. If there's no local events, you can also seek out online communities, like looking for Reddit, or like I said, Facebook, or whatever messaging system you use, like Telegram or something like that. And it's a great way to almost anonymously practice languages, and also you can search for communities that have your interests. So it can almost not even feel like language learning. You're just pursuing your hobbies, pursuing your interests, or furthering developing your education. You're just doing it in another language. So one fun way I like to practice languages is through video games, because it's a very interactive medium. So your parents might have told you that video games are a waste of time, but you could be using that to be improving your language skills. So especially if you're learning a very popular language like Spanish, French, or German, a lot of the major video games today are also translated and available in those languages. And you can just play the languages you want, and you can annoy your roommates by changing your console language if you want. And obviously, if you're not interested in video games, you could also search for TV or movies, or also books. So if you're very interested in one particular topic, you can look for books in your target language for that material. And the books you would normally be reading in your own language anyway, you can just read them in another language. So I just want to get across the idea that you just keep living life like you normally do and consume media like you normally do, but you could do that in a foreign language and just improve your language just naturally. One one less natural way is through, I recommend AI, either Bing Chat or ChatGPT. You can put in there a prompt like, hey, I'd like to practice German. I'm a beginner, and please correct me before whenever I write something to you. So then you can write and it'll correct you before it answers. And also there's, as you know, using AI chatbots, it'll give you little suggestions. So if you're a really beginner in a language, you'll get also suggestions for how to continue a conversation. Obviously a native speaker is best, but a native speaker won't be available 24/7, obviously. So especially thinking of time zones, if you're learning a European language, for example. But the AI is there for you. Obviously, one of the most traditional methods is to travel to foreign languages. That can be a bit of a pricey way to practice, but I think it's obviously one of the best. It's will completely immerse you in the language, where you wake up, you're hearing the language, you're seeing the language on signs all around you, and it's just something I would highly recommend when you're really serious about a language to go visit the country, even if it's just a holiday, just to get used to the language, get a feel for the language better. And when you're in that foreign language, I would encourage you to engage in your hobbies. So like when I was in France studying French in Strasbourg, I went every week to a board game club because I like board games. And it was really amazing just meeting local, the French people and just engaging in board games with them, hearing the rules, making wrong moves because I don't understand what they're saying all the time. I mean, whatever your hobby is, there's likely a group, well, unless it's a really, really niche hobby, but basically, like if you're looking for hiking, there's probably a hiking group in that country or that city. So I'd highly recommend seeking that out. So it's all about doing things you would normally do, but just doing them in your target language. So now I want to move into ways the language has given me opportunities, and maybe these can inspire you to find opportunities for yourself as you want to progress in a language that you're studying. So I was studying, I was speaking Spanish, and I met a Brazilian in a youth hostel in Orlando. I came back, I was very tired after a day at a conference, and so this Brazilian guy was just in my bed. I mean, I made it the earlier that day, and so it's just not the best situation to come back to. So I told him, like, you're in my bed, and then I found out, oh, he doesn't speak English. And I was like, okay, this is tricky now. And I was like, oh, maybe he's Hispanic, I don't know. But no, he spoke to me in Portuguese. Well, he's Brazilian. So, but I don't speak Portuguese. So that was the first time I ended up using a bridge language. We communicated then in Spanish, because many Brazilians also speak Spanish as a second language, because you can imagine in Brazil they're surrounded by Spanish-speaking countries, so it's a very popular second language for them. And so I said, "Estás en mi cama?" You're in my bed, and he moved to another bed. So it's a very small example of the use of the language, but often these are very small situations where languages can just help you get further. And then the next day we were talking and learned more about his life and why he was in Orlando and things like that. And it got to me thinking, like, it's kind of sad. We're speaking a language that's neither of our native languages, and we're having to do all these mental gymnastics through exceptions in Spanish, like all of these verb conjugations and things like that. And I thought about it even more, and I think about like English being used as an international language, like in Europe. And so you have like maybe a German meeting a Frenchman, and the only language they have in common is English, and they're having to jump through all these mental hoops in their head, which we don't, I mean, if you're an English native speaker, you don't think about it because you grew up with it all your life. But they're having to think through all these exceptions. So I was like, what could be a solution to this? And I had no idea back in '99. But in 2001, I was taking a class on called Models of Mind. It was an artificial intelligence class. And I guess you can imagine artificial intelligence was a very different field 22 years ago than it is today. But I was doing a paper on how computers could learn languages. And as I was writing this essay for the class, I found this dictionary online that used Esperanto as a bridge language. So for example, say you were trying to translate between Irish and Finnish. there might not be many languages for such a language pair, or many dictionaries for such a language pair. So they go through Esperanto, and so basically they take the word from Irish, translate it to Esperanto, then from Esperanto to Finnish. So I thought at the time, I think Esperanto is a stupid idea for people, but it's a great idea for computers, and it would be great for computers to process. And it's kind of sad, actually, that industries develop so much that they don't actually use Esperanto in this sense. So one of my professors said, you should look more into Esperanto, and I said, okay. And I found this book called Pasporta Servo. So there's a copy of Pasporta Servo there in book form. She's going to be passing this around the room. You can, so you can take a look at it, and she'll also pass out another booklet. Could you start on the other side of the room, passing the other booklet out? It's that's about an event that we co-organized, and you might have to do some hiking because I'm looking out here. But and I do want those back at the end. But the Pasporta Servo is a book that basically is a hospitality network of people around the world who are willing to host you for free if you speak Esperanto. So you can sort of think of couch surfing, but this was around since the 60s as a book. And it's and I love this ideal of the fact that I'm traveling to another country and I'm not forcing them to speak English, and I'm not, well, I can't learn every language of every country I want to travel to, so this seemed like the perfect opportunity. And then I found a free email correspondence course, and I was like, you know, I'm going to try a lesson. If I try it and it's a waste of time, I wasted a half hour of my life, or maybe I'll open up a whole new world. So I guess you can see which one happened to me. Today we have much better websites like lerno.net. We have Duolingo. There's also this book called Complete Esperanto. I highly recommend. So there's better resources today than there were 20 years ago to learn Esperanto. And we're sometimes shocked by people coming in and like, how long have you been studying it? Like, 2 months. What? Unheard of. So, speaking Esperanto, I sometimes joke that Esperanto is the only language where you could start learning it, and a year later you're founding a Wikipedia or an encyclopedia in that language. So in February 2001, I discovered there was an empty Esperanto encyclopedia. It even had a couple grammar mistakes in the Esperanto. And there was another encyclopedia online in Esperanto called the Encyclopedia Kaublanda. So the last guy's name was Kalb, so it was sort of like Kaubland Encyclopedia. And he had a dream in 1996 to make this online encyclopedia, and he spent 5 years working on it and had 150 articles, which actually for a single contributor, that's an amazing accomplishment to write that many articles. I mean, I don't know how many essays you write here at the Westminster College, but I know I can't write that fast. I contacted him and I said, you have this dream to have a general encyclopedia in Esperanto, and would you contribute your articles to the Esperanto Wikipedia? And he thought about it for a few days, and then he said, yes, let's do that. And we were fortunate to have one of the few encyclopedias that had a very strong foundation with these articles to start, about 150 articles. And because of that, for the first couple years, Esperanto was actually one of the top 5 Wikipedias, even surpassing German for a couple weeks. I think that the Germans got upset, so they really quickly wrote some articles to pass us back. And today, the Esperanto Wikipedia stands in size between Hungarian and Slovak. So I'm very impressed with the community and how much they've worked to produce this amazing body of knowledge. So it just sometimes blows my mind. Because if you think about it, before 2001, there was no encyclopedia in Esperanto. So, like I said, the best way to practice a language is travel to a foreign language, a foreign country, but how do you do that with Esperanto? There is no Esperanto country to visit. So I found these annual events that year in Brazil. So I went down to Brazil. I went to the Internacia Unolada Congresso in Pato Branco. in is the International Youth Congress, and there is meeting young people from all over the world coming in for that. Then I traveled along the coast of Brazil up to the top to go to Fortaleza, where we had the main Esperanto event. I believe that year it was 1,500 participants, so it's really impressive. And then I went down and stayed with a family in Rio for a week, and I just love this feeling of just being with a family and not forcing them to speak my language. And like I said, I can't learn every language of the world. I'd love to learn every language of the world, but it's a bit out of my range. I'll leave that for Judith. She can learn every language of the world. You know what I mean if you attended her talk on pronunciation of languages. So after Brazil, I decided I'm going to go through backpacking in Europe. So I visited these countries. For fun, I left them in Esperanto. So you can see Great Britain, France, Germany, Sweden, Czechia, and Slovenia. And oh no, I visited 6 more actually. That was an amazing trip, obviously, and it was really possible on a budget because I was staying with people along the way. Some people I met through the Passaporte Servo, that book that's going around. Some people I met at Esperanto conferences, and then just said, then they invited me, like, do you want to stay in Heidelberg with me? I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. You know, and you just make these contacts as you travel through Europe. And there's standing in front of the European Parliament building in Strasbourg. It's kind of a funny state of affairs with, I was visiting Czechia, and I was staying with an Esperanto Wikipedian there, and so I noticed, like, hey man, the Czech Wikipedia doesn't exist. Could you maybe help out with that? Because, you know, and he actually really wasn't interested. He said, you know, there's plenty of Czechs that could write the Czech Wikipedia. There aren't as many Esperanto speakers. I really want to work in the Esperanto Wikipedia. And I said, well, maybe just get it started, you know, it would be cool. And he said, you know, I don't speak English. How am I going to help get the Wikipedia started? So we actually contacted people at Wikipedia at the time, and he ended up translating the UI of the Czech Wikipedia from Esperanto. So it's pretty amazing that the entire Czech Wikipedia started with Esperanto as its base. So after that, thanks to Esperanto, I volunteered for TEO, which is the Tutmonde Esperantista Junulada Organizo, the World Esperanto Youth Organization. And there I was staying at the organization's headquarters, so which is quite amazing to be living in another country. And actually the thing I found even more of a cultural difference to me wasn't so much the language, but just the fact of moving from living in suburbs of Harrisburg to living in a big city like Rotterdam. It was a very different lifestyle, and it was just fascinating and I'm really happy to have that opportunity. And of course, through that, I met many interesting people. I was working with different European institutions and also communicating with members, member administration, and sending out materials and things like that. And of course, I took the opportunity to learn some Dutch. It would be a wasted opportunity to be there for a year and not learn any Dutch. And I was also very grateful that the Council of Europe at the time offered intensive language classes. So through my working at the Tutmonde Esperantista Junulada Organizo, I was able to attend an intensive French class that they offered in Strasbourg, France. So it's just like you just get into languages, and one opportunity will often start presenting itself after another. And speaking of which, I was then invited to travel to Russia. So the Rusia Esperantista Unio invited me there. That's the Russian Esperanto Union, which you probably already can understand. I don't need to translate that, but it's note that it's difficult to visit Russia without a sponsorship. It's often like you need an expensive hotel to prove that you're going to stay there and spend lots of money. But if you're a student, you often don't have lots of money to spend. And it was amazing to just have this organization invite me, and even then later accompany me to the City Hall to do the local registration, which is also something that's required in Russia. Obviously, due to the political situation now, I imagine it's much more difficult to travel to Russia, but I'm not going to comment on politics here. So I lectured in Volgograd at a language festival, and I think these language festivals are amazing. They basically take something like a school, and each room is set up for one language. Like you'll have the Spanish room, the German room, and so on. And so I did a couple sessions about English. I did one about Dutch, and they actually had it set up so that I was speaking Esperanto to the students, and someone would interpret to Russian for me. So it was a really amazing opportunity. And thanks to these language festivals, there in Cheboksary, another city in Russia, about a 12-hour ride from Moscow, there was actually 3 Esperanto youth clubs there, which I still find mind-blowing. But these language festivals really grew their community and became very vibrant there. Being there, I had to do some tourism in Moscow as well, of course. I visited the famous chess club, for example, where Kasparov and Karpov played their famous match. I don't know if there's any chess buffs among you who know about that match. It was very important. But just the point that whenever you're traveling, you can go seek out local opportunities to follow your hobbies. So thanks to Esperanto and Dutch, I was able to take part in another intensive French course in Wassenaar in the Netherlands. And I worked with his wife on Esperanto projects, and basically he often wants to have an even number of students so that they can have more conversation among themselves. So I was able to get a discount on his class, and he's actually one of the best French teachers in the world. He's just amazing. Won some prize with like the top 10 in the world or something like that, and it's just, I believe it, taking his classes, the progress is amazing. And a lot of his teaching method really is to become French. So I did everything around you in the classroom is in French, and you're eating French food, and everything like that. And also you assume a French identity, you get a French name, and because you have an identity in this language, you'll often be less afraid of making mistakes. And these were very, very intense lessons. I think it was about 8 hours a day, and the only break was after lunch. And that was because at lunch he would take the chance to really explain the food and talk about food. And obviously in French culture, food is very important. Well, in every culture, food is important, but I think especially for the French, they love talking about food. And it's also funny, you notice the course in the Netherlands, so the classes were in French, but then explanations were in Dutch, so that really pushed my mind to the next level to have to make that adjustment during class as well. A few years later, I had the opportunity to move to Germany. First, I attended the first Wikipedia conference in Frankfurt, and it was amazing meeting, I met Jimbo Wales, you've seen him maybe from the fundraising and on the website, and lots of other people, like the founder of the wiki, Ward Cunningham. And I mentioned to one person there, I could be interested in working in Germany. It would be an interesting change of pace from New York City, where I was living at the time. And then a couple weeks later, he sent me a job offer to be a wiki researcher there, and I took him up on it. And it was just an amazing 2 years working at a university as a researcher in Heilbronn, which is a bit close to Stuttgart in the south. And if you get a chance to work in a foreign country, I'd highly recommend it. It's a great experience. One funny anecdote, especially as an American living in Germany, was every 5th Sunday of the month, they had a white sausage breakfast. Anyone know what a white sausage breakfast is in Germany? Okay. Well, I didn't know either. So I get to work, right, for breakfast, and there's people having the big pretzels around, the white sausage, and the mustard for the sausage, and one of my colleagues says, hey, you want a Hefeweizen? It's like the wheat beer, and I'm like, beer for breakfast at work. And then I'm hesitating, and then I see 3 of my colleagues that already have one, and I was like, okay, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Sure, I'll take a Hefeweizen. It was a real culture shock to be offered beer for breakfast at work. Just very different. Very happy. Since 2006, I've been celebrating Christmas with Judith's family. And it's just been amazing just being with the family and just eating with them, talking with them, and obviously everything's in German, so it's quite challenging the first few times. I eventually get used to it, and you pretty much become part of the family then. One thing I like noting here is that you'll see the Christmas tree. Those aren't electrical lights; those are actual candles. So Germans like to light their Christmas tree with actual candles, and don't worry, they actually have a big water bucket on the side. So if there's any issues, then they'll be able to put out any fires. But there never any incident, right? No incident. Okay. They're very safe about this. But, it's a really big German tradition. So in 2007, I got to go to Japan. The Tokyo Esperanto Club invited me to speak there. There were every year this Esperanto Club invites one foreigner to come and speak to their what's called the Zamenhof Day party. It's every December 15th. That's so Zamenhof is the person who initiated Esperanto, and so many Esperanto clubs will have like a party that day. And I got to speak there, and I was about Wikipedia, of course. And then they also had 3 other Japanese universities lined up for me to talk at, and I was thinking, like, how can I communicate with these students? Should I lecture in English? They said, no, you lecture in Esperanto, and we have someone interpret Japanese for you. And so it's a bit of a surreal experience talking with Japanese students in Esperanto with interpretation, and it was amazing. And one more thing, when I was there, was I was visiting. I got to meet the university president, and so I don't know if you've met your university president here, but I know where I went, it wasn't such a big deal. It was like he's walking around campus. Okay, I mean, sure, he's important, but you don't think of it as being like, I don't know, a life-changing event or something. But I met one of these the university presidents, and afterwards, when I was hanging out with Japanese friends, they're like, "Oh, you met him?" I was like, yeah, it's just so amazing. It's just such respect for the authority figures there, and I was really blown away by that. Also, as a picture denotes, I visited, well, I like to call it an Esperanto Go Club. It's this game called Go that is played in many countries in Asia, and so they don't actually all speak Esperanto there, but the guy on the right up at the top runs this club, and he speaks Esperanto, so I like to call it Esperanto Go Club. And I thought it was funny because the 2 people in front I actually taught to play Go, so I taught them a Japanese game over there, and I just thought this was just, in Esperanto, of course, and it was just this crazy thing. Like, is this happening? Like, and I visited Akihabara, which has a big, I'm also into retro video games and got to try out some arcades there and things like that. And I was fortunate to play the Wii before it came to North America. So we were sitting in their living room playing Wii, and it was all in Japanese, and they were interpreting things to Esperanto, and and I was just like, this is so crazy. How am I here? So then I moved to Berlin, as I met an investor at an Esperanto event who had a startup in Berlin. And another hobby I had was I was a dealer at the poker tournament, not for money, just for fun. And then suddenly I was getting hired as a web developer and manager of basically the CTO of a poker social network in Berlin. And it was just crazy, all these things coming together, my knowledge of Esperanto, German, and well, in this case as well, poker and programming languages, to move me to Berlin. And now happy to live in the center of this vibrant city. I live about a 10-minute walk from this river that you see above my head here. But I'm mostly talking about languages that I speak pretty well, like Esperanto, German, and etc. But it's also important to know you can get a lot done with languages you only know a bit of as well. And that bit of is Polish, which I say every year I learn it and forget it, because I find the vocabulary so difficult. But I study with a method called Pemsler. Anyone heard of Pemsler here? Okay, Pemsler is a audio course where it's a bit of old-fashioned, but I really like it personally. It's really gets you to answer with a reflex in the language, like it's something like, you bumped into someone on the bus, what do you say? And then it'd be like, przepraszam, so excuse me. So I love this when I want to travel to a country and they pick up the language as fast as possible. So I was able to have some small chit-chat with taxi drivers, just say like, I need to go to the train station, how far is it, things like that. Obviously we're not discussing the international politics or anything, but it's still amazing what you can do with just a basic level of a language. And also I was staying later in a hotel that wasn't made for international visitors, and it was just nice that you know, you could talk to the cleaning staff when they come by. You can say, proszę wejść, you know, please come in, and things like that. And they really appreciate even just knowing a few words. I think they laughed a bit. They hear my American accent. They're like, yeah, this guy doesn't really speak Polish, but they appreciate the effort anyway. And just ordering from the hotel bar staff at this international event, they're just happy to have some people who can just order some basic things without relying on trying to figure out what they want by pointing to a menu or something like that. So another language I'm not too good at is American Sign Language, which I learned a bit from my mom because she was an amateur interpreter. And yeah, so this is from Alcatraz here. And where when I was waiting in the ferry line, I accidentally bumped into this deaf girl in line and just out of reflex said, excuse me, or sign excuse me, and was like, you sign? And then suddenly we were chatting with my very basic American Sign Language on the boat back to the mainland. And it just was a delight for her to have someone to talk with other than her parents the whole time. And we just had an interesting conversation, and it's just amazing sometimes just knowing little bits of languages, how they can just brighten up someone's day. And yeah, it's just great. So with Esperanto, I was volunteering for Duolingo. At the time, it was actually the most requested language on Duolingo, and Louis van An, the founder of Duolingo, he's like, I don't know what to do about that. How is this possible? So at the time they had a volunteer program, and they basically chose who would start courses by who had the most XP on the platform. So, and it was me and this one other guy, and we started making the Esperanto course, and then after about 20%, we were able to invite other people to join us, and making the course much bigger. And when this came out, it had about a similar amount of learners as Ukrainian. Obviously, this is also pre-war. It's 2013, or yeah. So that's not the same as today, but I would often tell publishers or people working with multiple languages that like if you want to publish an Esperanto course or something like that, expect about the same number of, or at least Americans, because mostly Americans, expect about the same amount of Americans to be learning Esperanto as Ukrainian. And the latest data that I have is that 1.5 million people have learned some Esperanto on the Duolingo course, which still kind of blows my mind. So, thanks to multiple languages, I don't know if the book is still running around here, the Polyglot Gathering, Judith and I co-founded. We attended a polyglot conference, which was the first of its kind in Budapest in 2014. And we had about 100 people there, and it was just a very interesting atmosphere, but we found it a bit too formal, a bit too academic. So like there was no opportunities in like the evenings to socialize, and people were staying away from the venue, and so we wanted something, a more informal event like we find at Esperanto youth events, where people were staying in the same place as they're meeting, and then she said, do you want to maybe organize this in Berlin? And I said, no, that sounds like way too much work. No. So we co-founded the gathering, and we ran this, and we had over 200 attendees sign up, and it has actually been very enriching, and I'm very happy that we've actually been running this, and about 3 years later, we passed it on to a team in Slovakia who's continued it on. Ran also 3 years in Bratislava, 3 years near Warsaw, and next year it will be in Prague. But first I want to tell you that our participants speak 6 languages on average, but there's no requirement of you have to speak so many languages to attend. If you're interested in languages, you can come. And so it was also funny for me to realize that with my 6 languages, I'm just an average participant there. And like I mentioned earlier, the next year's event is in Prague, and I welcome you all to come out around June. If you find it a bit too far to travel, there's also an online event that has happened every year since COVID began. And last year there were 600 people attending, and you can just participate online and attend talks, give a talk, and there's also language practice rooms. So it's just another great way to meet like-minded people interested in languages. And I have also mentioned that we had one guy there who would really took polyglotism to the extreme, and he would give a talk, and he would be just changing his language every 5 minutes. It's just kind of unnerving at the beginning. But really these kind of events are also amazing for just getting used to switching languages really fast, because usually you'll speak for one language for quite a long time. Maybe you go to another country, speak another language then. But it's not usually like, I'm speaking this language now, and now I'm going to speak this other language. So it's really great to get the practice in switching languages really fast. So I was fortunate to take another French class from the same guy, and the same way the instruction was in French, with rare explanations in Dutch. And this time it was in France. We had very authentic French meals, and then we'd also visit the local town nearby to practice. So we had little papers with the questions to ask people and to find out the local information. In 2015, I was excited to found the startup Amikumu, mostly thanks to Esperanto. So I sometimes like to call it the language speaker detector app. So like the idea is if I want to speak French, for example, I can I download the app, I fill out my profile, say that I speak these languages at these levels, and then I say like I'm looking for people who speak French nearby, and then I come up, and some people say it's like Tinder for languages, or we say no, not with the dating though, but it's kind of the quickest way in 3 words to give the startup pitch. And just been great seeing people use the app, and we support 7,000 languages. So it's really, we want the long tail of no matter what language you're interested in, even if there's only like a couple speakers of that language, you can find it on our app. And the majority of these languages don't have a written language, for example. But the ISO basically states there's 7,000 languages. So you want to support that. And we have over 30,000 members in 180 countries. And these members speak over 700 languages. I've been happy seeing people have these amazing interactions where they, some speaking the really small languages will, sometimes they find someone maybe 500 miles away, but they're still very happy to be able to converse with someone else in that language. And also we've heard crazy stories about like a guy in Brazil meeting someone in Dubai, and then later they're talking about it in Hong Kong or something like that. Just amazing seeing people use this network. So in 2017, I was invited to speak at UNESCO because of Esperanto in Paris. So I talked about modern communication tools at Esperanto's service. This was celebrating the 100th anniversary of Zamenhof's death. And so my talk was basically comparing communication tools of 1917 with 2017. So, yo dog, I heard you like presentations, so I'm going to put a presentation in the presentation. So here's a quick summary of that. In 1909, people were using amateur radio with Esperanto, and today we have Muzaiko, a 24-hour internet radio station. And my favorite example is in 1844, they had telegrams to communicate, and today we have messenger telegram. Just out of curiosity, how many people have telegram here in the room? A couple people, okay. Yeah, I think it's more popular in Europe from what I've seen. But we have a very strong Esperanto community, and there's also very niche communities on the app as well. So at the telegramo.org, you can find also many groups with many different topics that use Esperanto to communicate with each other. And one other last example is the Green Star, which was basically the idea was if I speak Esperanto and you have no way of telling that I speak Esperanto, so they had this pen that they'd attach here, and then you could basically inform other people non-verbally that you speak the language. And so our idea is that the Amikumu is the digital representation of that through an app today. So coming into the end here, I was also happy to get involved with a project called the Esperanto Stacio through Esperanto in German. This is a former train station right outside Berlin that this guy transformed into an event cultural center. And thanks to that, I was able to, we had actually local support from the government to run a video game festival, and I'm just like, so I'm getting thousands of euros at my disposal to buy video game equipment. Okay, this is amazing. so I ran that, and the latest project there is we're curating educational VR software. And yeah, we actually have a symposium, VR language symposium coming up in March. If any of you are interested, contact me if you're into that. It'd be interesting to talk to you. And they were curating educational VR software. It's sort of like the idea is to have an educational VR arcade and locally. And this is a somewhat rural area, so it's really amazing seeing people come there and getting involved in technology, trying VR for the first time, and also not having to rely on the big city of Berlin to provide everything, all the training like that. And funnily enough, if I look tired, I'm going to blame my meeting with the Ministry of Culture this morning. I woke up at 6 a.m. because of time zone differences. They visited the station, and I met them this morning, and just amazing the opportunities you get just because of the languages you speak. One last thing here is another language that I speak a smattering of is Greek. So I was living a couple months in Athens this summer, or this spring actually. The summer is really hot. I don't recommend it. But yeah, I was able to do simple things like check out of supermarkets in Greek, and the basic knowledge just set me apart from typical tourists. So it was just nice, and I just want to remind you that even if your knowledge of a language is really, really low, it can still be incredibly useful in ways you don't expect. And so the final opportunity I had, thanks to multiple languages, is speaking at Westminster College. So it's been amazing being here and meeting some of you, and also exploring the rich history of the area here. And just a reminder, these are the ways I mentioned to seek out foreign language opportunities. I hope you've been inspired, and I'm open for questions. So, is there a mic in the audience? Okay. So the question was my thoughts on languages that are not widely spoken. I think you can often get more close communication with the community if the language isn't spoken. I mean, you saw, like, when I started learning Esperanto, people said that that's a useless language, you'll never get anything out of it. But you see that I've had so many, like half the opportunities were from Esperanto. And I've heard stories about people like they get in a taxi in New York and they happen to speak the same like small language as the driver, and then they get invited to have dinner with the family and all kinds of crazy things like that. So it really is useful to learn smaller languages. I highly encourage it, and it often opens you up to a much bigger world. So I mean, if you go to another country and you speak English, you won't really have those big opportunities like that. And with the small languages, you really open doors like that. Yeah.
Okay. That's nice. Oh. So with Esperanto, I was wondering, how do you handle loan words and stuff like that, since we constantly, have new words that are coming from English and, it ends up in other languages, sorry.
Yeah.
But
so there's two rules that you can apply when having loan words to Esperanto. One is you can take a native language word and just transliterate that to Esperanto. And the other way is you can use the affix system, so the prefixes and suffixes to make a new word. Like or you can make compound words as well. Like two of my favorite examples are computer. I mean, obviously computer wasn't around in 1887 when the language was founded. And that today, there were actually different proposals like computero, computoro, but in the end people chose the most logical computilo, because ilo is a suffix for tool. So it's literally computing tool. And another example I like is cell phone, which became translated as post telefono, or the pocket phone. So it's and it just ends up being like what the community ends up speaking in general. Sometimes there's people using two words in different communities, and then they come together, and then they just end up liking one word better, and that becomes the word that's used. And that's kind of the same that happens in other languages as well. Well, except for the transliteration and choosing from the affixes. But yeah, that process happens in every language. So. Well, while we wait for the next question, I can tell you too, there's also an Academy of Esperanto that will propose words, and sometimes people will accept those words, and other times like the community will just go against the proposal. So I love how grassroots it is.
I was wondering, besides Polish, what was one of the hardest languages that you've learned?
I'd actually say the hardest language I learned was modern Greek. Because I just found that the words weren't similar to any other language I knew, often. Sometimes they were, but they were so different that I wasn't recognizing them. And so I found Greek actually the hardest language that I personally studied. So it's still a very rich and beautiful language, so I hope to pursue it more later.
Well, Chuck, thank you so much for this presentation. It was amazing.
Yes, thank you.
And my question is related to languages because I have been listening to this question these last days from some students, right? So saying, okay, we need to be exposed to languages, right? And you can play video games, you can go to a country, immerse yourself into it. How do you deal with that idea when you are a elementary, Spanish student, for example, right? Someone who, of course, will not be confident with any of the skills they have, right? And it is easy for us to say, you have to immerse yourself and talk to native speakers, but it's very intimidating for people. So what is your, recommendation for people who are just learning a language and they really are interested, but they are really shy about it because they believe they are not really good enough for it?
Yeah, so a lot of it are the options I have right on the board here. So I think personally the easiest way is to get immersed in languages, either to use an AI chatbot or to play a video game, because they're both very low-risk activities. I mean, if the chatbot finds your mistakes, who cares? You're not in a big social situation, and if you die in a video game, you'll get an extra life, I'm sure. So those would be my my best suggestions. But part of me is just also thinking, and don't be so shy. But but sometimes you can really just appear at an event with people of another language, and it's very intimidating at first. But there's usually almost always someone who will be there to welcome you and help you out. And I think you have a comment you want to make about that. I see. Yeah. The microphone is. Yeah.
Sorry for adding my thought, but I have found that there is a possible progression when you try to get comfortable speaking a language. The easiest is to write the language because you have a lot of time to research the words, look it up in a dictionary, use Google Translate, whatever you want to do. And the most time that you can have is if you're writing an email. So for me, the first stop is always to write emails, and then I graduate to text chat, because text chat is still slower than a real conversation. And then I graduate to voice chat, because in voice chat, if you don't understand the word, you can still write it down, or you can still, if it's a group conversation, you can still just listen. And only after that would I go for a real world conversation, which is still a bit harder. And after that, a phone conversation. I find phone conversations are the absolute worst.
And also, if you're willing to spend a bit of money, you can also find a tutor on something like italki, which will speak to you at your level. So, and obviously attending university classes is great too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. With this event, we closed the symposium. Well, almost. We still have a